Hi, Dr. Robert Selig, and today's video is a continuation of weight loss resistance and the 7 major roadblocks to why we cannot successfully lose weight. So in the previous videos, we talked about liver toxicity as one of the roadblocks, estrogen dominance is one of the roadblocks. In the last video, we talked about thyroid, and I went into what the thyroid needs and the nutrition and how important that metabolism, the thyroid hormone, is in our metabolism. But in today's video, I want to kind of connect the dots and stay on this hormonal theme. So I want to get into the thyroid, adrenals, blood sugar, and insulin resistance. Because when we're dealing with weight loss, we really need to understand how hormones are so critical if we are to be successful at losing weight. And hormones really are the health markers, so we have to understand hormones. So when we're talking about hormones, and we're talking about the steroid sex hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, your cortisol, all those hormones are so important, but they have a common denominator, and that is cholesterol. Cholesterol is the backbone to all your sex steroid hormones. So that cholesterol, your brain is 70% cholesterol, your cell membranes have that double bilayer on the cell membrane, which is cholesterol. So we have to understand the importance of cholesterol and not demonize cholesterol. So as we see, the cholesterol there's 2 components to cholesterol. There's, making the hormones. There's a yin and a yang. And so the yin cholesterol hormones are your pregnenolone. Your pregnenolone is going to become pregnant. It's giving birth to all your other sex hormones, including your DHEA, your growth hormones, your insulin growth factor, your testosterone, estrogen. So pregnenolone is really the main player that's going to give the pathways to the other hormones. And also we have more of the yang hormones, which are your cortisol and adrenaline. That's your more stress hormones. And so we're not demonizing cortisol and adrenaline because they're absolutely necessary for health. What we're trying to do is have a balance between the yin and the yang. But what I see is we're in this more wear and tear breakdown, more catabolic, where we're not building up because we're in this stress mode causing excessive cortisol production, where instead of making the pregnenolone to progesterone, the pregnenolone's going to cortisol because of the excessive stress. And again, when we're talking about stress, we're talking about chemical stressors, physical stresses, food stresses, emotional stresses. All the stresses are causing our cortisol to become really out of normal ranges, and that's why we always want to test your cortisol levels to make sure that they're in healthy ranges and healthy zones. And just think of cortisol as very diurnal. As the sun comes up, cortisol goes up. As the moon comes in, cortisol comes down. So when you wake up, you want your cortisol up. When you go to bed, you want your cortisol going down. So there's a nice diurnal cycle of cortisol, and everything is cyclic. So understanding the importance of cortisol. Now let's connect it to the thyroid, adrenal, and blood sugar. So we have a healthy blood sugar range, which is mapped out right here. So we have the y-axis is sugar and the x-axis is time. So when we're eating the typical high carbohydrate foods, the foods that we grew up on, the foods we love, our breads, our cereals, our pastas, and those are what we consider actually the good carbohydrates, but it's still sugar. So we have to figure sugar, carbohydrates into the equation because we want our blood sugar in this healthy range to avoid the roller coaster ride of when the blood sugar goes up. When the blood sugar goes up, that's going to send a signal to your pancreas, crank out insulin, because insulin has to bring the blood sugar down. Then the blood sugar crashes, then we go into, I can't think, I'm tired, I'm falling asleep, because our blood sugar is low. So we have this vicious roller coaster cycle where we're eating the carbs, and then our blood sugar spikes, and then the insulin spikes, and then the blood sugar crashes, and when the blood sugar crashes, what hormone is going to raise the blood sugar? Cortisol. So the main function of cortisol is really increasing the blood sugar. But then when we have this vicious roller coaster of high blood sugar, high insulin, then that high insulin is now the low blood sugar, and then the low blood sugar is now stimulating the cortisol. This vicious cycle is the trap that we're falling into. This is where we have to understand of blood sugar maintenance. So what we try to do is educate our patients on how to use a glucometer and to monitor your blood sugar. So when I talk about the healthy blood sugar zone, your blood sugar should always be between 80 and 100. Now when you wake up in the morning, your fasting blood sugar should preferably be around 95 or less. Let's say, between, the best number would be around 85, but if it's between 70 and 95, that would be a great fasting blood sugar. But not really seeing that in today's population in our society. So what we want to do is learn how to manage our blood sugar numbers. So wake up, test your fasting blood sugar. If it's over 100, you don't eat, because we're trying to reset the biological clock. So if it's over 100, you're going to drink some water, get some minerals into your body, move the body, check your blood sugar a half hour later. And if it drops under 100, go have breakfast. If it stays above 100, go exercise and drink more water until you get it under 100. Got to reset the hormonal clocks. Very important to understand how we're going to take our blood sugar really seriously by monitoring it. Now, during the course of the day, if you keep your blood sugar at under 100 for most of the day, so you eat a meal, that's going to spike the blood sugar. It can vary between 150 to 200 to above 200. All right, after an hour and a half, check your blood sugar again. If it's under 100, great. If it's not, go back and change the diet. Look at the carbohydrates. Pull out the carbohydrates until after, we call it a postprandial blood reading, and it's usually about an hour and a half after you eat. We want that blood sugar under 100. If you start practicing this and you do this religiously over a month, we can really start swinging the pendulum to get our blood sugars in favorable numbers, so we're not causing insulin, which is the fat storage hormone. Insulin, which is responsible for spiking cholesterol in abnormal ways. Insulin is responsible for promoting the bad estrogens. So insulin, when it's in excess and we're burning out the pancreas because of the blood sugar problem, we just run into so many problems associated with blood sugar, insulin, estrogen, cholesterol. So again, we're just trying to connect the dots and know that we can manage our blood sugar with a simple glucometer, and being very diligent in practicing fasting blood sugar after breakfast, hour and a half after breakfast, hour and a half after lunch, hour and a half after dinner. Check your blood sugar numbers. And again, if they're under 100, fantastic. Nothing to worry about. Then we can really use this tool to keep our hormones in balance. So like I said, hormones are the key to health, and we have to have a better relationship to our food, to our hormones, if we're going to deal with weight loss and health. Because it's not just about losing weight, it's about losing weight, feeling good, and getting healthy. That's the whole key to this. So we know that when we have, the elevated cortisol because our blood sugars crash, that's the reason why, cortisol is responsible for the belly fat, the hip fat. Cortisol is going to break down your proteins, because when we break down proteins, our muscle, then we start losing muscle, then we decrease our metabolic activity, because when you break down the muscle, you're getting those proteins to break down to make more carbohydrates. So that's why we have to understand the importance of the hormones. Also, when the cortisol levels start to come out of whack, it increases the food cravings. We start craving the bad foods, and it's usually the carbohydrate types of foods. It also is responsible for increasing secretory IgAs, which are an inflammatory marker of inflammation in the gut, and that will cause a lot of leaky gut situations. And when we have leaky gut, think of this, your gut tube, it's a tube, and so you have this tube and blood is on the outside, and you have your esophagus, stomach, small, large intestine. So that gut tube, when we start to have a leaky gut wall, where we call it a permeability thing, where the tight junctions start to open up, and then those proteins leak into the blood, your body looks at those proteins as invaders, and that sets off a whole immune reaction. So if we have leaky gut, we also have leaky brain. We talk about that blood-brain barrier. It's very similar to the gut barrier between our blood. So we're starting to see a lot of brain problems with senility, dementias, Alzheimer's. We're really plagued with this overwhelming diseases of the brain, and it's a blood sugar thing. We have to make these connections. So if we want to start taking our health to the next level, and we are starting to see our memory is starting to go, the brain fog is setting in, once we start fixing the blood sugar, we can really start reversing a lot of these chronic diseases that are plaguing us. And so when we kind of look at this more from an esoteric point of view, from a medical astrology point of view, when we're talking about the brain, we're talking about the hypothalamus pituitary. We're talking about the sixth chakra. That sixth chakra is ruled by the moon. The moon is responsible for sleep. So understanding how sleep is such a major player for the regeneration of our hormones. So here we have a lot of moon energy. When we're talking about the thyroid is actually ruled by Mars. Now that thyroid's in the neck area, but here we have in the neck area, we know that the taurines, those born in Taurus, are ruled by the neck. So here we have that Mars-Venus dialect right there in the throat. We also, on our kidneys, right on top of your kidneys, sits about the size of an almond, called your adrenals. So the adrenals are ruled by Mars, the kidneys are ruled by Venus. So again, we have that Mars-Venus dialect going on. We have it in the kidney adrenals, we have it in the Mars-Taurus relationship. And it's understanding these energetic imprints that we can influence by understanding how our emotions and our relationships can have a play on how we're assimilating, digesting, and breaking down life's energy. So just kind of understand that there's an emotional component, there's an energetic component when we're looking at the whole picture. But for the simplicity of this video, we're talking about hormones, we're talking about the importance of the blood sugar and connecting it to our adrenals and thyroid. So when we have a thyroid problem, we may have an adrenal problem. When we have an adrenal problem, we may have a thyroid problem. Now that's the importance of why we do testing, whether it's lab testing, muscle testing, kinesiological muscle testing. That will give me more of an indication, is it more thyroid or is it more adrenals? Because we have to be able to hone in on which organ is really the weakest. And most of the time there's a combination where there's a lot of overlap between the hormonal system. But having a clearer picture, but the takeaway messages for this video is understand the blood sugar, control your blood sugar, start practicing blood sugar management, start to get the carbohydrates out of your diet, do it intelligently, do it whimsically, but do it, because we want to really take the health to the next level. So know the importance of carbohydrates and how they can be so detrimental in our health. So when we're looking for a healthy diet, we're looking for the good healthy fats, about 60%, 30%, the good proteins, and about 10% or less from the carbohydrates. That's the takeaway message that I want you to get out of this, and as well as learning how to understand your blood sugar numbers. So if you have any questions, if you're struggling with any problems regarding hormones, blood sugar, call me. Come in for help if you really need some help, and I can help really assist you, and I can analyze you, through the lab testing on where your hormones are at. So it's very important that you just understand that, boy, we can really take our health to that next level if we start paying attention to the hormonal system and the blood sugar mechanisms. So again, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you respond with some questions and emails. And again, thank you for taking the time for watching this video, and have a good day.